My brother of the watch, it is about to be a great Star Wars week on many levels. So like in Star Wars in general, it's going to be a great week. But for the podcast, it is also going to be a great week, Mac.
Yeah, it's a fantastic occasion. Of course, the main event is Andor Season 2 premiering on April 22nd. A little bit later, we're a week away.
Yes.
But, for us, it's our birthday.
Yeah.
We've been a podcast for 6 years, and I think that's wild.
That is wild. That is, dude, that is so crazy that, 6 years ago, our first episode premiered where we were breaking down the footage from Star Wars Celebration of the first teaser of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, we have really come full circle. That's crazy. We've gotten just the opportunities we've had since then, all the amazing community we've ever been able to build since then, the people that we've met and everything. It's crazy to think of. So thank you all to the listeners and especially to our patrons and everything, y'all who have been with us since day one. We couldn't do anything that we do without y'all. You make it worth it and make it able to happen and all that kind of stuff. And we hope that we're doing a good job to kind of show our gratitude for all that. And speaking of opportunities and maybe kind of we kind of received a birthday present.
We did
this year.
And in a way we did. Yeah. It was a great birthday present. And in fact, it's a present where it's like one of those presents that you get to share with everybody.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is the best kind. It's like we've been given something that we get to pass along to everybody else. So we can't the wrapping paper is still on the box, so to speak, for the moment, but very soon. Keep your eyes peeled to the podcast feed and probably also the YouTube channel.
Yes.
That'll be a big one for this. But it's cool. Some cool stuff coming your way. It's been a really exciting week for Alex and I.
And it's coming later this week. We're not sure exactly what time. So, of course, like Max said, you want to make sure that you're subscribed on the podcast feed and on the YouTube. Maybe hit those notification buttons on YouTube so you absolutely don't miss what's coming this week. Yeah. The thing that we're talking about and kind of talking around, because we can't say it just yet, but we do want you to know. We want you to listen to it. Yeah. We think that you guys are really, really going to enjoy it. And we tried to tailor it in a way that you guys, specifically the people that listen to this podcast, would enjoy it. So I hope that's enough hints, but so that's coming sometime this week. And then of course later in the week we've got Star Wars Celebration starting on Friday in Japan, but really Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when it's going to be streaming. So we kind of have a plan because the Mandalorian and Grogu panel starts at 10 a.m. in Japan. That means it's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here. And we're going to be doing a live stream reaction to the Mandalorian and Grogu panel over on our YouTube. So you can come over and hang out with us and chat, like maybe on your phone or something while you're watching the panel on your TV or your computer, and just kind of get a live reaction to the information that we're receiving from the movie. And if there's a trailer, like an immediate trailer breakdown and speculation on that. So that will be a lot of fun. And it's like full circle because like we were just talking about, it was our birthday.
How we started.
Yeah, that's how we started. So.
Yeah, it's like poetry. It rhymes. A lot of really fun things coming down the pipe really fast. Keep your eyes peeled. You don't want to miss any of that. But there's a specific purpose we're on the mics today, and that is our Rebellion 101 episode.
Oh my gosh.
We love doing these. We do these every time a show is coming out. We've done Mandalorian 101. We've done the Jedi Order 101, the Sith Order 101. Now it's the Rebel Alliance 101. We're going to be talking about the history, the big players, doing everything to kind of get you caught up to speed, on all the information that is out there in the ether about the Rebel Alliance before Andor Season 2 comes out. We're going to run all that down. And you are listening to Children of the Watch. I'm Mac Lacey.
And I'm Alex Maxwell. And like Max said, we are breaking down everything you need to know before Andor Season 2. And if you're new to our podcast, we break down every single episode of Star Wars television, scene by scene, to analyze the story, find comfort Easter eggs, and explain how it all connects to the larger Star Wars universe. And that's exactly what we're doing, like Max said. So maybe you're not like super in depth into whatever, like everything that happens, kind of the connect to Andor. We're going to provide that for you, so that way you feel like you're in the know when you're watching season 2, because the way season 2 is structured is every 3 episodes is a year leading up to A New Hope, and specifically Rogue One, but that's kind of how it breaks down. And so we're definitely going to be talking about year by year. Okay, what happened in this year with the Rebel Alliance? What do you need to know, all the way up to the Death Star? So that's kind of our plan for this episode. But we also want to make you aware of what our plan is in terms of how we're going to be breaking down Andor Season 2, because we had a big debate of how do we actually handle this with 3 episodes coming out in a week? Do we do 1 episode per episode, or and we just kind of felt like that was a lot of podcast episodes in your feed, and so we want to be making sure that we tailor it to how you guys consume the podcast. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do one big breakdown of all 3 episodes in 1 episode of the podcast. However, maybe you just watch 1 episode the first night, or maybe it's just the first 2. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to give our general overall thoughts of the entire arc, and then we're going to jump into our episode by episode breakdowns. And as we discuss each episode, we're only going to focus on that particular episode. So if you want to jump to that one at a, like, I don't want to hear the general thoughts, I just want to go to episode 1, I want to hear that breakdown, you'll be able to do that, because there's going to be timestamps in the description. And when you finish all 3 episodes, you can go back and listen to the entire discussion, because we're aware that maybe you won't be able to watch all 3 episodes in one sitting. So that's how it's going to work, is just make sure you check the description, and you'll be able to go to the timestamps, and then we'll talk only about that particular episode at those timestamps.
Yeah. Well, just a couple other little bits of business to get out of the way. We'll get through them real fast before getting into the Rebel Alliance 101. We are currently having a giveaway contest going on right now. If you want to win a Children of the Watch t-shirt, Andor Season 1 on Blu-ray, and a Rebel X-Wing pilot helmet, all of that in a big bundle. You can check the rules for our contest. Basically, if you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast specifically, and then leave the word Axis in the code, or in the review rather, that's the code word, and then you can screenshot that, send it to MandalorianWatch@gmail.com, and that's how you get entered into the giveaway. And we'll be announcing the winner on the final voicemail episode for Andor Season 2.
That's right. That's right. And then if you're an Android user and maybe you don't have Apple, you can go to a Windows desktop and download iTunes and give a review on the computer. That is an easy way to do that.
Easy in quotes,
And then our friends over at Oysters, Clams, and Cockles, they are breaking down season 2 of The Last of Us, which just started. So you make sure you want to listen to their coverage if you're watching that show. They do it exactly the way we do it, because they're the podcast that inspired us to start this podcast. So make sure you check them out. And then, of course, when Andor gets started, we want to hear from you, and we want to hear your theories, your thoughts on what's going on with Andor. So make sure you call into our voicemail hotline, 205-259-6675. Keep it under 3 minutes. If you mess up, hang up, try again. Let's do this. It's time for class.
Yeah. We got the administrative work, out of the way. Everybody's paperwork's done. You're all enrolled. Ding, ding. Welcome to... That sounded more like a wrestling bell than a school bell, but...
WrestleMania is coming up.
It is coming up. It is. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Rebel Alliance 101, I love doing these. And the Rebel Alliance is specifically a subject that is it's kind of the first thing that most people understand when they're watching the original trilogy. Like it's, they're the good guys. They're the heroes. Great. We got it. They're fighting the Empire. But when you get into the granular detail of how the rebellion forms, how it operates, there's so much information to uncover. It's a really deep kind of layered story. And we're going to be talking about stuff that is contained in all kinds of media. It's a lot of stuff comes from Star Wars Rebels. A lot of stuff comes from, books and things like that. We have Rogue One that already informs a lot of the, how the Rebel Alliance kind of scores their first big victory and stuff like that. So this should be a lot of fun. I can't wait to talk some Rebels.
So like, and that's the important thing too, is like we already have another show that's in the same timeline as Andor, and what this particular episode is going to help try to do is weave those two timelines together of like, okay, so when is Star Wars Rebels happening in relation to Andor? I think we're going to attempt to tell you when those things are happening and where they overlap. So let's start with the foundations of the Rebel Alliance. I don't think we can actually talk about like, okay, when it gets started and hot like it does on Ferrix in the end of season 1 of Andor. What actually led up to those moments? Let's talk about the foundations. And if we're looking to deep dive into the rebellion against the Empire, the origins of the Rebel Alliance start all the way back in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And really the seeds of this conflict are in episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, I mean the Trade Federation is kind of one of the first they're almost like a shadow version of what the Empire is to come,
right?
And operating similarly. Even a lot of the Empire's ships and stuff kind of would have been derived design wise from Nemoidian cruisers and stuff like that,
right?
Just in like the way they look and aesthetically. So yeah, it is really important to look all the way back, because if we're talking about a rebellion against the Empire, we're kind of talking about a rebellion against Palpatine, and Palpatine's been at work since before the prequel trilogy.
Right. And we see his first real machinations come to fruition in episode 1. That's his kind of first gambit against the galaxy to set things up for himself. And so, of course, we got to talk about that, because what's happening there is the taxation of trade routes and corporate interests superseding the will of the people. And that's really what births this conflict. Everything that goes on in the Phantom Menace leaves a really bad taste in a lot of citizens of the galaxy's mouth. And out of that, I think, is what starts to birth the separatist movement.
Yeah, and the separatist movement, even though it's characterized as kind of the villainous side, like they're the bad guys in the prequels. The skeleton of the separatists is kind of where a lot of the first rebels come from.
Yeah.
Cassian, from season 1 and stuff, we're not quite sure how Marva and like how Cassian has been in this fight since he was 6 years old,
right,
as a separatist and everything. Not too sure about how all that's going to go. Maybe we'll get some more in season 2,
right?
But at the time of Rogue One, the information that was provided to us was that Cassian had been a separatist, and like his family, before joining the Rebel Alliance,
right?
So that's even really important to realize, because it's especially with a show like Andor, when we're talking about the messy aspects of a bunch of people working together, that's an important thing to already have in mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And so the gap between episode 1 and 2 is 10 years, right? So there's 10 years that happened between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So despite Palpatine becoming elected Supreme Chancellor and promising to stop the bureaucracy, a further gulf developed between the factions of the Republic, and a coming conflict was just inevitable. And of course, the Confederacy of Independent Systems that were birthed out of that conflict were manipulated by Palpatine and Dooku in the shadows, but there had to be like a real sentiment to manipulate. right? That doesn't just pop up on its own. That was bubbling under the surface. It's just that Palpatine and Dooku took advantage of it.
Exactly. Because there are some very real grievances that the Separatists can have, that the Republic has overstepped in a lot of ways, or is doing various things. And too. Yeah, that's a huge thing as well. Just kind of by negligence marginalizing parts of the galaxy.
Right.
That's very important to realize. And there was a sentiment there that was already like, okay, maybe this big galactic power is not a good idea. Yeah.
Maybe we should do this on our own instead of, this huge, slow moving government. Yeah. So instead of that sentiment of, hey, there's something wrong with the Republic morphing into a rebellion, those that wish change to veer away from the Republic look to corporations to back them instead of the people. So that was really the first big mistake of the Confederacy, is they saw, okay, well, we've got to have someone backing us to make sure that we get what we want. And so they turned to the corporations like the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, the banking clan, all of that, to see, okay, if we get these guys on our side, then we can really show the Republic. Instead of it, so it became really like a top-down change instead of a bottom-up one.
Yes, it's not a grassroots movement like the Rebel Alliance is. It is, like you said, it's these big institutions like the banking clan, the Trade Federation. They're the ones leading this charge. And of course the sentiment against the Republic is there at the grassroots level. But what this specific movement of the CIS is, it's like you said, it's driven, orchestrated, and manipulated by these big institutions. And I think it becomes very apparent very fast. Those are not the best things to let kind of be the form of government.
Right, because then all of a sudden you are just handing over the things that you want to entities that are just like the Republic, or maybe even worse. You know what I mean? Like
worse.
It's just
like with less oversight and things like that,
and more greed. So it's just like, why would you turn to them? But again, I think that's where that manipulation from Palpatine and Dooku came from. And what I find so interesting, Mac, about these separatists is that they weren't necessarily wrong to do what they did. I think, like you said, they had true grievances with the Republic. Like you look at people like Marva and Clem in season 1 of Andor, they've got grievances with the Republic. They're not on the Republic side during the Clone Wars. There's a reason for that, and they're good people. So, it's not like the Republic is perfect. And I think, people like Padme and to an extent Mon Mothma, like we see in the deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith, they're starting to figure out maybe the Republic is the bad guy. And Padme even brings that up to Anakin. He's like, what are you talking about? How dare you?
Yeah. No.
So I think they just put their hope in the wrong things.
Yeah, basically. I think that's the best way to put it. But you can still see that spirit of like resistance blossoming up in the lower levels of the separatist movement.
Yeah, so let's jump into the Clone Wars that break out, of course, at the end of episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and then followed through with the Clone Wars animated series. Of course, you've got the Separatists, which many will later join the early rebel cells scattered across the galaxy, but you also have resistance movements on backwater planets trained by Republic clone commanders and Jedi.
Yeah, and this becomes a huge thing, as we're about to get into, particularly with Saw Gerrera and his presence in Andor and Rogue One. We're getting his origins even this far back in the Clone Wars. But yeah, it's very interesting that like watching the series, there's a lot of times where the Republic is like, we can't overtly send the Grand Army of the Republic in here because that would be viewed as like a violation of neutrality or not respecting a planet's own like agency in choosing if it's a part of the Republic or not. But what we can do is send in almost like undercover operatives. They're not exactly undercover.
Insurgents.
Yeah, it's, you're sending people kind of under the radar to these grassroots groups of the people of the planet to train them, to empower them, to lead them to fight back the separatist threats.
Yeah, overthrow their governments and join the Republic.
Right.
And then we can go.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but you kind of see the Republic doing like operating a little bit like the early rebellion we see in Andor.
Right.
Like this seems like a very guerrilla thing that we'd see, Luthen instructing somebody to do.
Right. Yeah. And so as the Clone Wars raged on, the Republic knew that they had to help train resistance movements on separatist held planets, like you were saying. And so this plan was proposed by none other than Jedi General Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And he went on with Captain Rex to help train the Andoranian resistance movement led by, like you said, Saw Gerrera and his sister Steela. They were opposed to the separatist-backed king of their planet, Sanjay Rash. And so they were trying to overthrow the separatist king because they wanted to install their own. And of course, the Republic had vested interest in that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's nothing unfamiliar from real life. We know of instances of governments doing this all the time.
Right.
So I like that. The real world parallels that Andor kind of holds so closely to, you can even see them in these stories of rebellion, like in the Clone Wars and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Anakin and Rex trained them to be insurgents, giving them tactics to use when they were outgunned and outmanned. And really, you can say that the seeds of the Rebel Alliance were planted by Anakin Skywalker. And I just love that poetry of it.
Yeah. I mean, at least Anakin's influence on the rebellion is present and observable. It's, I think, tactically they learn a lot, because I would imagine the early Rebel Alliance, even like, folks who are joining other cells joining up that are not part of, anything, but they may be looking to Saw's cell, the partisans, to be learning how to fight and stuff like that, because they are the kind of the active military wing of the rebellion at that point.
Yeah. They're the earliest rebel cell.
Right. Yeah. And they're the most militant and stuff. So Anakin's tactics, Anakin's fighting spirit, that all trickles down into, the movement that his son ends up joining and becoming a hero of.
Yeah, it's just interesting. The very thing that he ended up fighting against as Darth Vader in the Empire is something that he started.
Yeah.
Like that's because of you, dude. Like, you helped train people like Saw Gerrera to do what they're doing, and now you got this problem that's growing and growing and growing because of what you did 20 years ago. And so I love that. And so just a little background on what happens with Saw Gerrera. His sister, spoiler alert, dies. And I think that starts to push him into more extremism whenever he's doing operations, because I think his sister was the one that tempered him. And when he lost his sister, he really kind of went over the deep end in terms of he's going to get revenge no matter what. He's going to use the tactics of the enemy to win.
Yeah. Yeah, it pushed him from the realm of being a young person wanting to fight for the good of Onderon, for the good of the people around him and stuff like that. It pushed him in the direction of having a very personal vendetta against authority, really, because it doesn't matter if it's the Republic, the Empire, the Separatists, any kind of big kind of authoritarian presence Saw is going to fight against.
If you're in charge, Saw hates you.
Yeah. And I think that's also interesting, examining him as an extension of Anakin in a way, because it's the part of Anakin that forsakes his actual values, even though he's fighting in the name of something that he keeps saying is like the greater good. Right. But making it about his personal feelings, his personal fears.
Right.
So I think Saul is a great extension of Anakin in that way.
Well, I mean, he's a very good parallel to Anakin, even all the way up until Rogue One, when he's got the breathing apparatus. He's more machine now than man. He really is kind of, almost the parallel to it on the rebellion side in a way, which I find so fascinating and interesting. But you have to imagine, Mac, that wasn't the only planet that happened on, and other Jedi most likely trained other insurgents as well across the galaxy, right? You just got
The galaxy's a huge place. The Clone Wars was a massive conflict. Like if this happened once, if this was in the tactical au revoir of the Republic, then it probably happened again.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But the battlefield isn't the only place we find the seeds of the rebellion. They also were planted in the Senate during the Clone Wars because, worried about the Chancellor's emergency powers that seemed to be growing every single day during the war, Padme Amidala of Naboo, Bail Organa of Alderaan, and Mon Mothma of Chandrila worked together to form a coalition known as the Delegation of 2000. Now, this all comes from deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith, where you even see Genevieve O'Reilly in those scenes. She was cast as Mon Mothma all the way back in 2005 in Revenge of the Sith. And she's there in those meetings, having those conversations. And it's really those three senators that formed the coalition of 2,000 senators. And what they did is that they signed a petition asking that Palpatine relinquish his emergency powers immediately when the war concluded. And like I said, there's a really cool deleted scene that they have a discussion of this. That I really wish they had kept that in the movie.
Yeah, it would have gone a long way to, especially now that we have the Clone Wars and everything after, and then Andor and Rogue One and all that kind of stuff. It would have been really great to see the seeds, start here in the movie itself. But I mean, you definitely see that the watchdog mentality has already started. It's Padme, Bail, and Mon Mothma, who they're like, we need to take it upon ourselves to make sure this situation with the Chancellor doesn't get out of control. Because it seems like we're the only people kind of who can see it. So, them and the delegation of 2000, that's definitely what we see Mon Mothma going through in season 1 of Andor. The seeds of that start here. The battle that's being fought in the Senate, continually.
You're right. And then obviously, though, they didn't get anywhere with that because the events of Revenge of the Sith play out. And Palpatine takes power and changes the Republic over into an empire. So let's move away from the foundations of the Rebel Alliance and move into what I call the early days of the Rebel Alliance, because this is really still pre-Rebel Alliance. There's no alliance yet. This is where we start to see all these different Rebel cells popping up that are disconnected, but will one day become connected in the Rebel Alliance. So in the early days of the Empire, they were largely unopposed. Most of the public opinion was in favor of the switch to a stronger, united empire. And having just come out of the Clone Wars, pretty much the citizens of the galaxy were willing to trade their freedom for security. They were like, I'm done with this. I cannot go through this again. Whatever you got to do to stop them, let's do that.
Well, even more than security, just stability. Like the Clone Wars were such a chaotic time with the galaxy divided, and I think just knowing that even if like your ruling force feels bad, if it feels the same way every day, that may be more appealing than the chaos of the Clone Wars.
That's a great point. Yeah. And so I'm sure there's a lot of sentiment of like that, of like, I don't really like these guys, but at least, there's no bombs tonight, so there's that. If anyone was opposed to the Empire, it was extremely difficult to speak out in these early days. And a few days after transitioning to the Empire, they arrested every senator of the delegation of 2000. And they held them for a few days, and then they were promised release. if they pledged their loyalty, and all of them did, including Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, because they saw the writing on the wall that they weren't going to be able to do or change anything by making this meaningless statement.
Yeah, I think it's at that moment that they knew that there was work that had to be done in the shadows first. Yeah. And so I think it was here that they resigned themselves to, like, we're gonna play the part publicly. We're gonna, act like good little senators from here on out. While we know now we have to take our fight underground for the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. So we know that the Senate wasn't dissolved immediately with the Empire forming.
Right. It wasn't until A New Hope we actually get a line indicating the moment that happens.
Yeah, it took 20 years.
Yeah.
Basically, whenever the Death Star comes online, they realize that they don't have to have the charade of the Senate anymore.
Yeah, because the charade of representation was a tool they were using to maintain order.
Right. Yeah. So it gave citizens of the galaxy a feeling that not all that much had changed because the Senate is still there, that their voice still mattered. But the regional governors, Moffs, were instituted very, very early, and they had direct control over new partition sectors of the galaxy and could deal with problems that might arise more quickly and more effectively than the old Republic system. And it's honestly, it's not a terrible idea, the Moff system, in terms of like, okay, well, it's a huge galaxy. You can't get Coruscant to move to the outer rim and get something done like that. But if you have someone there in charge, that makes a little sense. But of course, it just leads to more tyranny.
Right. Well, because the problem is the sectors weren't allowed to, like, determine their own governors. And so, like, it's not someone who's of that place with that place's best interests in mind. It's someone the Emperor has installed because they know, like, the Emperor knows this person is just an extension of my control, of my authority.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like, yeah, like, it setting up little, like, kind of breaking down the representative republic further to have, like, sector executives of some kind. There's ways in which that could be done and work really well. It's just, it's not like this when it's people the Emperor is installing. Because it's an occupying force.
Right. Essentially, that would have become what the Confederacy of Independent Systems were fighting for, right?
Exactly.
Like these independent regions that had elected their own kind of mini chancellor and like, let's run this sector. That's really what they wanted. Except, like you said, Palpatine's now deciding who's in charge, and it's not democratic. It's not anybody getting to decide that. So, great point by you. So at this time, Saw Gerrera and his partisans on Andor immediately switched from fighting separatists to fighting the Empire. However, Saw begins expanding his scope outside of just Andor and starts to hit other planets within that same sector. Yeah. So he's starting to go off of Andor just a little bit here. And Gerrera's partisans weren't the only rebellious activity that happened in the really early days. The former clone commando squad, the Bad Batch, started to find and interact with former clones like Captain Rex, who opposed the new Empire. And so you start to see that as well.
Yeah. The Bad Batch is one of the best looks we have at, like, the day of the Imperial transition, basically. And then the following, short days. So yeah, like you said, there's a lot of the clone army, that don't go down quietly with the transition to the Empire, particularly anyone who had their inhibitor chips removed for any reason or anything like that. So some of the first rebels really are just the clones, because I think they got to see the curtain pulled back on the plot first, as they watched their brothers killed their commanders, like, in front of their eyes. They're
the ones that they realize, oh, we were used, we were literally born to do that one thing, really.
Yeah.
So and we don't have the details yet, but there seems to be some kind of clone underground that resisted the Empire. We saw a little bit of that in the final season of The Bad Batch, but the culmination of that event is where we're unsure of yet, and those gaps I think probably will be filled in. I would guess coming this week.
We'll probably have some indication
animation.
Yeah. I think we'll get some news that might indicate where we're going to get that story.
Yeah. But then also on Ryloth, Cham Syndulla became the leader of the Free Ryloth movement. And if you're unfamiliar with Ryloth, that's the Twi'leks, the Headtails. It's their people, that's their planet. And Cham Syndulla is Hera Syndulla from Star Wars Rebels' father. And so he's another instance of Jedi-trained resistance now leading a rebellion against the Empire, though this particular cell was isolated only to Ryloth. Cham did not care about anything else but Ryloth.
Yeah, and he was also very resistant to joining the Republic. He would accept the Republic's help to beat the Separatists out of just practical need, but like it was always with the understanding and like the condition that, hey, we're fighting our mutual enemy together, but we're not part of you. Like I'm fighting for a free Ryloth, just this planet. We get to determine what happens to our planet.
Right.
So I don't know. I like Cham. I think that's like if Saul had stayed like Cham, he probably would have kind of kept his soul a little bit.
Yeah, I would say so.
But he may not have inspired enough around the galaxy to form what we know the Rebel Alliance becomes. So, it's a who's to say how that would have shook out.
Right. And also in these early days on Mon Cala, which is the Mon Cala species like Akbar, Raddus, that species, King Li Char's government started to be advised by an Order 66 survivor named Jedi Farron Barr from the shadows. He told them to resist the Empire, and the Empire sent Governor Tarkin to negotiate with the Mon Cala. Initial talks went well, and there appeared to be a deal being formed. However, Darth Vader sensed that a Jedi's hand was at work and arrived with 3 newly established Inquisitors to find the Jedi. And of course, Mac, that didn't go well.
No,
that didn't go well at all. Yeah, so a younger Commander Akbar didn't acknowledge the reason of Vader's visit and barred them from their investigation. As Tarkin's negotiator left, his shuttle exploded. Of course, the Empire attacked the planet. Both Akbar and Raddus saw military action in these early days. Raddus managed to break the blockade around the planet and escape with many ships, but the early fighting saw an end when Vader killed Farron Barr, the Jedi, in a duel on Mon Cala, which is really cool. It's an arc that happens in the Darth Vader comics, which by Charles Soule, maybe some of the best Star Wars comics ever written.
So good. It's a big focus of that first run, right? There's kind of 2 installments, and this is kind of the
early days of Darth Vader.
It's really good. I love just that Mon Cala gets set up early as a authority on fighting the Empire, right? They've already had military run-ins. And you see kind of the very start of the Rebel fleet get started with the ships that Akbar escapes with.
Raddus.
Sorry. So, it's important to like, I think it's a cool event to have in your mind. Like, this is why the Mon Cala are looked to by everybody else for their naval experience and stuff, because they've already fought the Empire. I think it's cool.
Yeah, because I've always wondered, like, how did the Mon Cala just like build these ships under the Imperial thumb, right? Like these huge warships, like those are the big boys of the Rebel Alliance. Those ships. Well, it's because Raddus escaped with them, and it basically was on the run, like Battlestar Galactica style, for like 15 years or so.
There is a whole other. There's an arc in the mainline Star Wars comic. I'm not sure if we'll get there, but it's
go ahead.
In this. It happens between, I believe, Empire and Return of the Jedi. And it's basically how they fund and construct the big capital ships for the rebellion. So it hasn't happened yet. This is just the very start of the fleet.
Yeah. Can I just say, I love Star Wars comics, but specifically, I really, really love the Dark Horse run before Disney bought Star Wars, because they could literally do whatever they wanted because there was no oversight of, hey, we're going to do this in the movies and TV shows. So I understand the position Marvel's in right now, but Star Wars Legacy has the best space battles in a Star Wars comic I've ever seen.
Yeah,
it takes place like 130 years after Return of the Jedi, and it is just phenomenal stuff. If you're really into that, like fleet battles and stuff like that, definitely check out those comics. Super cool. You get Luke Skywalker's drug addict great grandson is the lead character. He looks like the lead singer from Nickelback in it, and it's incredible.
Look at this hologram.
All right, let's get back to our history lesson here. In these early days, Bell, look at this hologram. Okay, I just realized what you said. Yeah. In these early days, Bail Organa worked behind the scenes with members of the Alderaan Guard to help identify resistance groups across the galaxy and to search for any surviving Jedi. So you see Bail start to, hey, if we're going to resist, we've got to start linking up. And I think that's really his idea. Like, he is the origin of that.
Yeah. We see in Andor season 1, Luthen basically getting a lot of the rebellion started in terms of doing the actions, right? He's kind of the one that's getting things started on an operations front, but it definitely seems like Bail's the person who sees the need to work together, the need to, like you said, like unite all these cells, because if we're gonna be able to make a dent at all, we're gonna need to stand together, amass our strength.
Yeah, we gotta start organizing. We gotta start planning. Yeah. And that's so much like Bail. And you see where Leia gets that too. Yeah, I think it comes a lot from Bail.
Yeah.
So then a young Ahsoka Tano was eventually found by Bail Organa, and the two began to work together in secret on a planet she was hiding out on, Rada. She helped cultivate a resistance movement, and with the help of Bail, was able to evacuate them whenever the Empire caught wind of their activity. After this incident, she started working under the codename Fulcrum. You can read this in the Ahsoka young adult novel. It really highlights all of that, but you also see the finale of that in Tales of the Jedi when she kills that Inquisitor. That's the end of the book, essentially. And that's how she starts working for Bail under that code name. And the interesting thing about that code name, Mac, is the code name was from Anakin Skywalker's subspace communication frequency he would use during the Clone Wars. So he is the one that, again, started that code name, and she started using it, which, now that I'm talking about it, doesn't seem super wise on her part to be using that name.
A little revealing, maybe. Of your personal identity. But I mean, it's been long enough. The galaxy's a big place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then also, I guess she doesn't realize Darth Vader is Anakin. She thinks Anakin's dead until we see what happens in Star Wars Rebels. So that makes sense. At some point, Luthen Rael begins working with Mon Mothma in order to fund rebellious activity across the galaxy. So that's kind of this time period that's happening. And then in 10 BBY, that's Battle Before Yavin. So 10 years before A New Hope, when Luke Skywalker destroys the Death Star, the Hidden Path makes contact with Obi-Wan Kenobi. They were a group dedicated to fighting and protecting Force-sensitive children. Finding and protecting, not fighting.
How to fight younglings.
And helped lead a major attack on the Fortress Inquisitorius to rescue Princess Leia of Alderaan, which you can see in the events of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. Not terribly important for like the rebellion overall, but it's another instance of these groups that have like different kinds of focuses, but that can all be part of this greater movement fighting the Empire. Because it's not like the Jedi are the rebellion, but certainly, force sensitive children deserve to be protected and stuff like that. So
well, and then you've also got to think about like how a young Leia is seeing all of this and how that might impact her as she grows up of like, I want to be involved in things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the clandestine nature of what the hidden path is doing, that does kind of inform how the rebels operate a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't watched Obi-Wan Kenobi in a long time.
You should.
I need to rewatch it.
It's a really good watch if you binge it. Like it feels really good just binging right through it. It's just a good fun. I have really fond memories of watching and covering that just because it was during Star Wars Celebration, kind of like with Andor season 2. There was just a lot of hype around it. It was just fun. A summertime show. I like stuff like that. But let's start counting down the years leading up to the Death Star. Right, the Death Star destruction. So we start with 5 BBY, that's Battle Before Yavin, and the events of Andor Season 1 take place. So everything that happens in Season 1 of Andor takes place in the year 5 BBY. Because of the actions of Cassian Andor and an overeager Cyril Karn, the Preox Morlana sector loses direct control over the sector, and the Empire becomes a bigger direct presence in the region.
Mm-hmm. And so, even though that's not as important as like the next thing that Cassian does for the rebellion, it puts fuel on this fire, right?
Yes.
It gets the Empire tightening their grip. It makes the kind of the oppression more visible to everybody. Mm-hmm. It's like now there's stormtroopers in the streets, and it's the Empire is done with the semblance of delegation of power or anything like that. Right. They're stepping in directly anywhere they can.
Right. Exactly. So Luthen Rael recruits Andor for the Aldhani heist, which they successfully pull off. However, the heist has far-reaching consequences for the galaxy. And because of this, Cassian is later sent to the Narkina 5 prison because of the poor directive, which we talked about in our Season 1 breakdowns of like, it really was an excuse from Palpatine to start these labor camps and start arresting people.
Yeah, just to get free labor for constructing the Death Star. And I'm sure all the rest of the Imperial war machine. It's just another instance of them tightening that grip.
Right. And when they tighten that grip, it makes the rebellion grow a little bit
every
larger.
Time. Yeah, because more people are inspired to take up arms, whether that's proverbial or not.
Right. So let's now break down when Star Wars Rebels starts, because I think this is really important in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. So let's look at this. In one of the ISB meetings, Dedra mentions an incident on Kessel.
Yep.
We can take this as a reference to Solo, which would have happened 5 years prior to that conversation, or we could take it as the events of the first episode of Star Wars Rebels, which take place on Kessel.
Yeah. I like to think either is great. It's fun to have a reference to either. But I kind of tend to think it's the Rebels one just because it's more closely tied into what happens with the rebellion developing. But it is important to remember that the Cloud Riders they start fighting the Empire with the fuel
That's a good point.
They steal from Kessel, that Solo and crew did. So like even that is directly funding or feeding into the rebellion.
You're exactly right.
Either way, I think it works. That's probably why they chose to keep it a little vague, is because it could be either.
Yeah, I could do for a Solo rewatch right now. That's a fun movie too. So we don't know exactly the timeline because they haven't made that clear, but our best guess when we both did the research, here's what we've concluded in terms of when does Star Wars Rebels start and how does it overlap with Andor Season 1. We believe that the events of Star Wars Rebels begins during the Narkina 5 prison arc. So when Cassian is in prison for an extended period of time, like a couple of months at the very least. I think that's when the first few episodes of Star Wars Rebels starts. And I think that's starting to make sense because so episodes 1 through 7 of Andor happen, and then Star Wars Rebels starts sometime during Andor episodes 8 through 10. Okay. So let's talk about the Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, the Lothal Cell. So that's a rebel cell consisting of the Rebels crew, and they're operating on Lothal against the Empire from directions of the mysterious Fulcrum.
Yeah.
And we know that Star Wars Rebels Season 1 transitions to 4 BBY in the middle of the first season because of the episode Empire Day.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where we're getting this math from. So I know this is kind of a lot, but I would say that Andor Season 1 ends around Star Wars Rebels Season 1, Episode 5 or 6. And then episodes 7 through 14 of Rebels takes place after Andor Season 1. And here's why that's important, because we see the Lothal Cell make a major move against the Empire, and we don't hear about it on Andor. Tarkin himself gets involved when Ezra Bridger makes a broadcast encouraging rebellion across the galaxy. So that would have to happen after Andor Season 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would, it kind of echoes what happened with Marva, right? Marva was like a very small scale instance at the end of Season 1 of Andor, broadcasting her like self eulogy, but just as a call for resistance and to fight the Empire. Very, very similar kind of broadcast that goes out with Ezra. And I think that that's a big turning point for the Rebel Alliance being able to come together.
Yes.
In going from individual cells into a united, organized front.
Yes.
Because it's like Nemik's ideology in Season 1 that he gets to spread and kind of, we'll see if that comes back up again or anything later.
Cassian's got the thing, so
right. So I mean, I love when these big speeches, these big manifestos or orations.
Manifesto sounds. There's a negative connotation to manifesto.
There is, but it's not a necessary one necessarily. Right. Blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily a necessary necessity.
Yeah, it's but there is no better word for it.
No, I mean it is what it is. It's a summation of a set of ideals, which But manifestos, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It just
I agree.
A lot of times
there's
there's a lot of instances in which manifestos are not great.
Right. So the message that Ezra broadcasts across the entire sector is cut off when Tarkin destroys the communication tower. Kanan, the leader of the rebel cell on Lothal, is captured, and the cell rescues him from Tarkin's Star Destroyer and escapes after receiving help from 3 Corellian corvettes. And they learn they were aided by Bail Organa, who reveals that they are one of many cells now openly fighting the Empire. And they end up meeting a rebel agent known as Fulcrum. Surprise, it's Ahsoka Tano.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yep. And so sometime after this is when Season 2 of Andor will start. So the end of Season 1 of Rebels, then at some point Season 2 of Andor is going to start. But on the Star Wars Rebels side, the Lothal Cell joins with Commander Jun Sato and his corvettes and a squadron of A-Wings to become what is known as the Phoenix Cell.
Yeah.
And so elsewhere, Saw Gerrera and his partisans continue their activity. Another rebel cell forms, the Masasi group, led by General Jan Dodonna out of the Great Temple on Yavin 4, though I may suspect that we're going to see this formation happen probably in Andor Season 2.
I mean, it would make sense. We know that
it's in
Rogue
the trailers.
One, and Rogue One, everybody's around that table. It's not the first time that's happened,
right. Exactly.
They got to get to Yavin somehow.
Yeah. So let's move to 4 BBY, which we were kind of already in, but this is 4 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Phoenix Cell recruits former clone commanders, including Captain Rex, to their cause. Because of the presence of 2 Jedi with this particular cell, Darth Vader became personally involved in hunting down this cell. The cell also worked closely with a Mon Calamari engineer named Quarry to acquire a prototype B-Wing.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of the first time we see the B-Wing in action with Hera Syndulla flying it. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's the closest thing that the rebels have to like a super weapon, you know?
Yeah.
It's super difficult to fly, but it's got crazy combat capabilities. So, you know, acquiring the B-Wings is a big deal in bolstering their fleet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because it's also such a unique fighter, right? Like how do you fight that thing?
Yeah, like where do you aim? Who knows?
Right. Right, because it can just twist and the cockpit stay exactly where it's at, which is really cool. But then after a major defeat on Gorel, a planet close to Lothal, Bail Organa sent his daughter Leia to provide Phoenix Squadron with 3 Hammerhead corvettes. And I think these are the exact same ones we see used in the Battle of Scarif in Rogue One.
Yeah, I think that's an easy call. And the Hammerhead corvettes get used in Rogue One, buddy.
They do. Yeah, they do in a great way.
In a great way.
In a great way. So let's talk about 3 BBY, 3 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Phoenix Squadron negotiates an alliance with Fenn Rau's Mandalorian protectors in the Concord Dawn system. And you just know that the Empire started getting nervous here. Like, don't like to see that.
And it's very abnormal, right? Because like Mandalorians have such a loyalty to themselves and to to Mandalore and everything. So to be able to join up with other people to fight a common enemy, that's a big deal. And like, they're bringing some serious dogfighting capabilities with the Mandalorian protectors there.
Yeah, because they're mainly like a squadron. They're the fighter pilots of the Mandalorians.
They're the protectors of Concord Dawn. They're basically the force field keeping anybody out, even though it's not a force field. It's just
they got a really cool look because they're wearing like flight suits and like very light armor. Yeah, I like it.
But it's still very Mandalorian.
Yeah.
It's good.
Man. Of course, we had to talk about the Mandalorians on this episode.
Of course.
We're going to find a way to fit them in. The Phoenix Squadron then coordinates with Cham Syndulla's Free Ryloth movement and acquire a Quasar Fire class cruiser by stealing it from the Empire. So this is where you see Cham Syndulla actually help the rebels and starting to operate outside of just Ryloth a little bit. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it's a big deal because he's so dedicated to acting as just Ryloth that
when your daughter comes calling, you gotta okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do this. I really like all the interactions between him and Kanan because it's so like father-in-law, son-in-law type thing going on between them.
Like cleaning the gun on the front porch steps when the boyfriend comes to pick the daughter up. Yeah,
I like it. And then we also see them establish Chopper Base on Autolin, where there is a mysterious creature living on that planet.
Yes.
Then Bindu. I'm in the middle. Then we transition to 2 BBY, so we're now 2 years before the Battle of the Death Star, and Grand Admiral Thrawn is deployed with the 7th Fleet to quell the growing rebellion in the Lothal sector. It's getting a little too big for the Empire, and they send their best guy to take care of it.
Yeah, they're gonna need to make a statement because they're Lothal that cell is making a little too much noise.
Yeah, we can't let the rest of the galaxy know about this. So Phoenix Cell acquires 5 Y-Wing bombers from a salvage yard, and they are transported to Dodonna in his cell. So this is really where we start to see some of the cells coordinating in a big way of like the Rebel cell, like Phoenix Squadron isn't using them. They're literally acquiring them to take them to Yavin 4.
Yeah.
And they're not even going to use them themselves. So that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, they're working together to support each other and to accomplish objectives like in a cooperative manner.
Right.
That's a big step from where we saw.
It's huge. Sabine Wren infiltrates Sky Strike Academy to extract pilots Wedge Antilles and Derek Clivian from the Empire. That's a big deal because Wedge is one of the survivors and really like back-to-back Death Star beater. Like he's there and at both of them to destroy them.
Yeah. If you need a Death Star blowed up, bring Wedge.
Well, that's why Lando brought him to in The Rise of Skywalker. They're like, hey, this guy's really good.
He's kind of our lucky charm, honestly.
Yeah. So then the Mandalorian protectors are wiped out by the Imperial-backed Viceroy of Mandalore, Gar Saxon, and that kicks off a new Mandalorian civil war. So again, the Empire was like, you know what? I don't really like the Mandalorians get involved. Let's have them get distracted.
Yeah.
This brand new Mandalorian civil war we got cooked up for them.
Yeah. And they do the smart thing, which is like install a Mandalorian who's loyal to them over everything.
Yeah.
So, let's get them all fighting amongst themselves so we don't have to fight them. That seems like a good idea.
Right. We also know that this is the year the Gorman massacre occurs. It's in 2BBY. In terms of what that looks like, how that's going to play out, I assume Andor season 2 is going to be dealing with that.
Yeah. I mean, the footage we've seen from trailers and stuff certainly indicates that's kind of where we're going.
It's coming. Then Mon Mothma gives a speech in the Senate condemning the Gorman massacre. We know this from Star Wars Rebels. And Mon Mothma is branded a traitor and flees Coruscant. Again, I think we're going to see that in Andor season 2, which is going to be really, really cool.
Yeah. Yup. Andor season 2 can't get here soon enough.
It's 1 week, dude. 1 week. I can't wait.
It's too long.
It is too long. But the rebel cells in operation organize into the alliance to restore the Republic above Dantooine. So after that happens, this is where the rebel alliance is officially formed. So they've been kind of loosely working with each other at this point, but now we are the rebel alliance, and that speech is made over Dantooine.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where the magic happens, baby. This is where we get the Force. We see it taking down the Death Star in A New Hope. Getting the plans out of Scarif in Rogue One. It was all leading to this.
Right.
I love how much care has been put into the formation of the rebellion. It's such an interesting story. It feels so real and, just because of how detailed it is. But it's good to finally have a united front against the Empire.
Yes, it is. But that's not the only thing that happens in this year. Saw Gerrera investigates Geonosis with the Ghost crew, and he realizes the Empire is seeking large amounts of Kyber crystals, and he's starting to realize they've got something cooking. And he starts to wonder what that is. And then Grand Admiral Thrawn destroys the Phoenix Cell above Adolin, and it does not go well for the rebellion. They really tried their first major offensive and got Thrawn wiped. Just got them real good.
Just cleaned the floor with them. This is the first big united defeat of the Rebel Alliance, but it had to happen. Because we know that
Rogue One's the first victory.
Yeah. So everything until that, can't go too well.
No. Then we transition into 1BBY, so 1 year before the events of A New Hope. The Alliance High Command sets up a base on Yavin 4, though they were already using it beforehand. It's just that the leadership moves there at this point.
Yeah.
The Empire begins mining Kyber on Jeddah, and then Bo-Katan Kryze is given the Darksaber by Sabine Wren and unites the Mandalorian clans. So the plan for the Empire to let's have the Mandalorians fighting each other doesn't go well. And And Palpatine knows that if the Mandalorians join the Rebel Alliance, they're probably done. Like everything that he's got planned is not going to work because, as we know, Mandalorians are crazy.
Yeah.
You do not want them on your bad side.
No. I mean, it's the worst army that in the galaxy. The Mandalorians are the number one force in the galaxy that Palpatine does not want to have to contend with.
Right.
Until the rebellion gathers enough strength, the Mandalorians they're the only single force that can, threaten the Empire in any way.
Right.
When
united, they're dangerous, and now they're united because Bo-Katan has the Darksaber. Yeah. Well, enter Moff Gideon.
Yeah.
So the Night of 1,000 Tears occurs almost immediately after that, decimating Mandalore and effectively taking the Mandalorians out of the equation for the rebellion. So that's why they don't really get involved. That's why they're scattered, and that's really where the Children of the Watch go underground to make sure, hey, we're going to stick to the old ways, because obviously when we come out in the open and we try to unite that way, it doesn't go well.
Yep. I would have loved to see what the rebellion with the Mandalorians looked like. I think it would have been a lot quicker. I don't think we get a whole original trilogy out of it.
Probably not.
We get one movie, probably.
Yeah. This is done.
Yeah.
Because the Mandalorians are now raiding the Senate building.
Yeah.
They've invaded Coruscant. So this is done.
Palpatine's lightsabers are now trophies somewhere.
Exactly. So after the Night of 1,000 Tears occurs, Lothal is liberated from the Empire, and Grand Admiral Thrawn disappears, because here's the thing. This isn't considered a Rebel Alliance victory.
Right.
The Rebel Alliance wasn't able to help with the Lothal situation at all. What the Lothal cell had to do is really literally lean on the people of Lothal to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And so as we know from the epilogue in Star Wars Rebels, the Empire doesn't really advertise that this happened, and Lothal doesn't either, because they don't want to bring any extra attention to themselves, and the Empire doesn't we're just going to leave that alone. If they took out Thrawn, we'll just let them be.
It's we don't want this to get any hotter than it already is. We'll just let y'all kind of go quietly into the night.
And maybe it's because they were getting distracted with, we're almost done with the Death Star, so we can go take care of Lothal once we're done with the Death Star.
Yeah, we'll just blow it up.
Right.
It's our ultimate victory is about to be achieved. So.
Right. So it doesn't matter. And so, but here's the deal. It takes Thrawn out of the equation for the original trilogy as well, which Thrawn on the Empire side during the original trilogy is kind of that equalizer to the Mandalorians on the Rebellion side, in a way of if they had Thrawn present, the Empire might have won.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big deal. Good for the Rebellion that Thrawn was
on Peridea
dealt with
Ezra. Yeah. He's chilling with those little guys somewhere on Peridea.
Little turtle hobbits.
Man, I love them. I miss them. Yeah. And then the events of Rogue One happens.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to get too much into that, because go watch the movie. It's amazing. But I
rewatched it last night.
Oh yeah?
I remember thinking Rogue One doesn't really it's kind of slow until Jeddah, of when she sees the hologram. But if you go back and watch it after watching season 1 of Andor, it's man, this thing is moving.
We're moving.
This is the fastest movie I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah. But in Rogue One, the Death Star plans are the existence of the Death Star is discovered. They Cassian and Jyn Erso and team go steal the plans, get the plans out for the Death Star, so that the rebellion can eventually stop the ultimate plot of the Emperor. Yeah.
Luke and Han and Leia can do what they need to do in New Hope, which takes place a week after Rogue One.
Yeah. So Yeah, well, that's kind of the story of the rebellion. I mean, everything else you can just watch the movies and see how it plays out.
Exactly.
But it's such an interesting topic. I love learning about all the different places that the rebellion comes from in the galaxy and kind of the struggles they had getting it all to work together, all the different personalities that are at play together. So this is a really cool survey of the history of the Rebel Alliance. Yeah. And it is getting me so excited for Andor season 2.
Yeah, man.
I cannot wait to talk about Andor season 2 with all of you. It's going to be so fun.
And like we said at the beginning of this episode, you're going to want to make sure that you keep checking the feed of the podcast this week, because this isn't the only hype that we're going to be doing for Andor season 2. Like if you think you're excited for Andor season 2 now,
just get
just
ready.
Wait. Just wait.
Yep. Cool. Well, yeah, this is gonna do it for us until except for those special little things coming down the line.
Yeah.
But the next big main episode we're gonna be back on the feed for is Andor season 2, the breakdown of episodes 1 through 3 coming at you next week. So I can't wait. Be sure that you have entered our giveaway contest if you want to. Leave your 5-star review and the word Axis in it, screenshot it, and send it to MandalorianWatch@gmail.com. And be entered to win a Children of the Watch t-shirt Andor season 1 on Blu-ray and a Rebel X-Wing pilot helmet. So do that. Call into our voicemail hotline. We definitely want to hear all your thoughts as soon as you get to see the first 3 episodes. We want to hear everything that you loved, everything that shocked you, everything that you think is coming down the line for us next week. Call in with all of that. 205-259-6675. That's 205-259-6675. I think that's going to do it for us, Alex. Any parting thoughts for us?
Oh, man, I'm ready to rebel. Rebellions are built on hope. What else can we say? May the Force be with you. Dude, I am so Star Wars right now. Like it's consumed me, and I'm hoping that it's consuming you. I hope that you infect other people with Star Wars and invite them in on this fun, because the best way to grow a podcast is by word of mouth. So if you and your friends are watching Andor season 2, number 1, get them to watch it. Number 2, make them listen to the podcast after watching it, because we want everybody in on the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog, listen to Children of the Watch. We will see you next week for our first breakdown for Andor season 2. But until then, keep the watch.